Hey Abyss Walkers, welcome back to one of the most popular series on the channel, and honestly, one of my personal favorites. I've spent the past week deep diving through your comments, combing through forums, books, games, and putting together a new list of entities for this second part. And let me tell you right now, the gods we're covering today aren't just disturbing. Some of them feel wrong to even describe. We're not talking about overpowered villains or deities that just want to rule the universe. These are beings that represent things we were never supposed to put into words, minds that don't care about worship or destruction, because they don't even recognize you as something worth interacting with. Some of them are machines, others are symbols, and a few don't make any sense at all. That's the point. What they all have in common is the kind of fear that doesn't come from what they do, but from what they are. Fear of losing your body, fear of losing your mind, fear of existing forever in a way that makes you disappear. If you saw part 1, you already know the tone we're going for. If not, buckle up, because from here on out, things only get worse. These are the most terrifying gods in fiction, ranked by pure existential fear, based on your suggestions, my own findings, and a week of staring into the abyss until it started to feel too familiar. Warhammer 40K. There are many terrifying gods in fiction. Some burn worlds, others twist reality, but few are as disturbing or as strangely intimate as this one. This is Nurgle, and if you've never heard of him, don't worry. I'll walk you through a bit of the lore. It's dense, yes, but I promise it's worth it. Because once you understand what this thing really is, you'll see why. In a universe full of monsters, this is the one that smiles at you while you fall apart. Nurgle doesn't hate you, he doesn't want to destroy you. He isn't seeking vengeance or redemption or glory. He doesn't punish you, he just waits. And when he finds you, he doesn't crush you. He embraces you, because he knows everything will eventually collapse, everything. And when it does, you'll be alone, broken. And that's when he appears, not to judge you, but to offer you rest. In the universe of Warhammer 40,000K, a far future where humanity survives in a dying empire surrounded by aliens, heretics, and demonic forces, there are cosmic entities known as the Chaos Gods. They're not gods in the traditional sense. They are living manifestations of extreme emotions, violence, ambition, excess, and in Nurgle's case, fear of death, despair, and that quiet need to keep living even when there's nothing left. Nurgle is one of the 4 major gods. He's called the Lord of Decay, the Father of Plagues, the Great Corrupter. But among his followers, he's simply Grandfather Nurgle. Because unlike the other gods, he doesn't act like a tyrant or a monster. He acts like a father, warm, close, infected, yes, but strangely loving. And that's what makes him so terrifying. When a human being gets sick, when pain takes over, when all hope is gone, he offers something no medicine or religion can give: total acceptance. He tells you that you don't have to fight anymore, that it's okay to be broken, that if you give in, the suffering will end. Not because he'll heal you, but because it won't matter anymore, because your body will be his, yes, covered in boils, tumors, and rot, but free from fear. And for many, that's better than staying alive. This isn't a metaphor. In Warhammer, this happens literally. There are humans, soldiers, even entire cults who pray to Nurgle to bless them. And he does. He gives them immunity to pain, to fatigue, to fear. He gifts them diseases that kill their enemies but not themselves. In exchange, their bodies deform. They swell, they ooze, but they don't die. They become living instruments of the cycle of decay. Because that's what this terrifying god represents. The cycle. Everything that is born eventually rots, and everything that rots gives way to a new form of life. For him, nothing truly dies, it just changes. An empire that collapses makes room for another. A body that decomposes feeds fungus, bacteria, and eventually other creatures. Nothing disappears, everything transforms. Death is not the end, it's a transition. And that transition has a name. Khorne wants blood. Tzeentch wants to reshape the world. Slaanesh wants you to feel everything until it breaks you. He doesn't want anything. He just wants you to understand that the struggle is over, that this rot, this peace is what comes next, and that you can live with it if you accept it as part of you. Even his enemies, like Tzeentch, the god of change and planning, despise him deeply. Because Tzeentch represents ambition, the urge to break the present and build something new. Nurgle is the opposite. He's the weight of time, resignation. That moment when you realize nothing is going to change. And the most unsettling part of all is that he isn't angry about any of this. He's happy. He literally laughs. He speaks with affection. He calls his followers children. He doesn't ask them for blood or sacrifice. He gives them names, sings to them, takes care of them, even if they're covered in maggots. That's his way of loving, rotten, diseased, but sincere. Nurgle doesn't rule from a golden throne or a fortress made of bone. His domain is a living place, literally. Deep within the endless extra-dimensional chaos known as the Warp, a kind of parallel universe made of pure emotion, lies the Garden of Nurgle, a festering ecosystem that grows and contracts like a diseased organism. It's not a hell of fire and screams. It's worse. It's a damp, heavy place covered in deformed branches, bleeding leaves, and breathing fungi. The air is thick with spores. The ground is layered with warm mud, vegetal flesh, and organic fluids. The trees are swollen with tumors. The flowers cough. Everything that lives there is dying, and everything that dies feeds something else. But the place isn't empty. It's teeming with life, grotesque life, infected life. Demons of Nurgle, beings born from the god himself, inhabit the garden as if it's always been their home. And it has. They aren't rabid beasts. They're cheerful, almost childlike. They laugh, they jump, they sing as they spread disease, because to them, infection is a gift. Plagues aren't weapons, they're offerings. There are different kinds. The Nurglings are the smallest, lumps of meat with legs and mischievous grins. They move in packs like a living infestation. Then there are the plague bearers, thin figures covered in boils, each with a single glowing eye. They count, literally. They track every infection they spread, like they're keeping score for a bacterial empire. The beasts of Nurgle are massive, slug-like creatures, slow, affectionate, and lethal. They throw themselves onto victims like they want to play, crushing them by accident. And above them all are the great unclean ones, Nurgle's greater demons. They are massive, bloated beyond reason, rotting from within. And most disturbingly, each one is a partial extension of Nurgle himself. They aren't just servants, they are fragments of his being, made flesh. And at the heart of this impossible garden is his mansion, a colossal rotting structure filled with twisted hallways, fungus-infested chambers, carpets devoured by insects, and staircases that creak like ribs. This is where Nurgle lives, where he works, where he cooks. Because yes, Nurgle cooks. In his central kitchen boils an eternal cauldron, large enough to hold all the oceans in the galaxy, filled with pus, fermented fluids, and diseases in various stages of development. Every plague he creates is tested first, not on just any mortal, but on a goddess. Isha, the Eldar goddess of healing, is trapped in a cage inside his laboratory. Nurgle forces her to drink his latest concoctions, watching how long it takes her to recover. If he's not satisfied, he starts again. The scene would be pure torture, if not for the fact that Nurgle does it with total gentleness. He doesn't see cruelty. He sees progress. And while he's distracted with his work, Isha takes the chance to whisper to mortals how to resist his plagues. Sometimes it works, but not for long, because Nurgle learns, he adapts, he refines, again and again. The garden is full of places like that. The deathbeds where the bodies of invaders sink into the muck, waiting to be used in new experiments. The Deathbell Lily Fields, where black flowers bloom and chime every time someone dies from one of Nurgle's diseases. The Plague Yards, testing zones where demons unleash new infections on live subjects, watching the results with scientific glee. None of this is metaphor. This exists in the Warhammer universe, and its effects are very real. Entire worlds are devoted to Nurgle's cult, colonies where citizens, deformed by infection, worship their diseases as divine gifts. To them, pus is a blessing. Pain is redemption. Resistance is arrogance. They celebrate rituals, organize armies, and march into battle with rusted armor, sagging skin, and wide smiles. Because they know they can't really die. Not anymore. Their bodies don't feel. and their souls no longer fear. All of this follows a structure. Nurgle has sacred numbers, 7 and 3. His rituals, armies, and prayers revolve around them. Many of his creatures won't even act unless the count is correct. His cult is orderly, meticulous, obsessed with recording every plague. At the heart of chaos, Nurgle offers a twisted kind of stability. And what's most disturbing is that he never hurries. He doesn't need to conquer, he only needs time, because everything that resists ages, everything that's built cracks, everything that's born dies. Even the Emperor of Mankind, the glorified corpse who sustains a galactic empire from his golden throne, survives only because thousands die each day to feed him. His body is already dead, his soul is trapped, and his throne stinks of burnt flesh and resignation. For many, this is the most terrifying creature in all of science fiction, not because it's loud or grotesque, or even particularly aggressive, but because it represents something far worse, inevitable, intimate, and incomprehensible suffering. This is the Shrike, but to understand it, we need to go back, not just in time, but across timelines. Hyperion is set in a far future where humanity has expanded across the stars under the rule of the hegemony of man. Hundreds of planets are connected by teleportation portals known as farcasters. There's a complex balance of power between humans, AI, and a splinter group called the Ousters, who've rejected centralized control in favor of biological evolution in deep space. But far from the centers of power lies a planet that shouldn't matter, and yet it does, a place called Hyperion. It's not like the others. Most worlds in the hegemony are mapped, civilized, indexed. Hyperion is a wild, mythic wasteland, harsh, empty, dangerous. But underneath its surface runs an impossible maze of tunnels, ancient ruins whose builders are unknown. This alone would be unsettling, but it's what rises above the surface that terrifies everyone, the time tombs. These aren't temples or palaces, they're structures that move backward in time. Wrapped in anti-entropic fields, the time tombs violate causality. They are literally from the future, bleeding into the present, and guarding them, living in their shadow, is a being no one understands, the Shrike. It's called many things, the Lord of Pain, the Angel of Retribution, the Avatar of Suffering. But none of these names explain what it actually is. It looks vaguely humanoid, but that word becomes meaningless when you see it. Over 3 meters tall, with a body of fluid metal that seems to shimmer like mercury and twist like a living razor. Its entire form is covered in barbs and blades, protruding from its skull, limbs, spine. Even its breath feels like it could cut you. It has 4 arms, 2 end-in hands. The other 2 are pure weapons. Its eyes burn red, and when it looks at you, you freeze. Not from fear, but from something deeper. As if reality itself hesitates when the Shrike stares, and then it moves, except it doesn't. It's there, and then it's not. And then it's behind you. This isn't speed, it's temporal violation. The Shrike doesn't travel through space, it disregards it. It jumps through time like someone walking across a room. For observers, it appears and disappears without warning. For victims, time slows to a crawl, stretching every second into an eternity of paralysis and dread. It doesn't run, it arrives, slowly, calmly, inevitably. And every movement feels like the final moment of your life being replayed in slow motion. Its victims are not simply killed, they are chosen. And the most fortunate are impaled upon the Tree of Pain, a massive structure made of metal and thorns, constantly shifting like a nightmare that never stabilizes. Hundreds of bodies hang there, some human, some alien, all conscious, trapped in eternal agony. The tree is not metaphor, it exists, it waits, and it is the Shrike's cathedral. What makes this worse, infinitely worse, is that this isn't some rogue being rampaging through the galaxy. People worship it. A religion has formed around the Shrike, the Church of the Final Atonement. They believe the Shrike is divine, not a god of mercy, but of judgment. They organize pilgrimages to the time tombs, and the rules are terrifyingly simple. Only groups with a prime number of individuals may approach the Shrike. Upon arrival, it will listen to their wishes. It will grant one. The rest will die. No one knows why. It just happens. And people still go. Because in a universe filled with death, war, and existential dread, some believe the Shrike is the only thing that tells the truth. And the truth is, pain is coming. You can't stop it. You can't explain it. You can only accept that it's already on its way. In the pixelated nightmare of World of Horror, gods don't descend from the sky with fire and lightning. They seep through cracks in memory, through static on TV screens, through rituals half-remembered by cults that no longer exist. The game calls them old gods, entities beyond space, language, or explanation, and they are waking up. Among them is one that barely speaks, that has no clear form, no clear agenda. It's just a name whispered in system errors and corrupted memories. Something truly evil. It's not the most visually striking. It doesn't have a dozen eyes or tentacles or mouths. It doesn't scream. It doesn't even move. It simply becomes present. And once it's here, everything else begins to unravel. In terms of lore, something truly evil is one of the most mysterious entities in the game. Unlike Yog-Sothoth or Yog-Sothoth, who have clear thematic domains like time distortion or blood rituals, this god doesn't represent anything so specific. It represents corruption itself. Not moral, but structural. The decay of systems, the breakdown of logic, and the terrifying possibility that the world doesn't need to be destroyed, because it's already falling apart on its own. When this god awakens, the screen flashes a message: no rest for the wicked. But this isn't a prophecy or a threat. It's a diagnosis. From that point on, the world has already ended. Not with fire, but with mechanical rot. You begin to notice changes, interfaces break, items disappear from your inventory, text overlaps, NPCs speak in fragmented phrases, music loops incorrectly. The UI becomes erratic. And none of it feels like a bug, because it isn't. It's intentional. The god is rewriting the rules, not to challenge you, but to remind you that the rules were never real to begin with. This is what makes something truly evil so terrifying. It's not just a monster in the story. It's a force that violates the structure of storytelling. It doesn't possess characters. It possesses the game, the code, the frame, the way you process time and information. Every day that passes, every action you take, accelerates the entropy. The doom counter rises. The visuals distort. The narrative logic starts to slip. And all the while, you keep playing, trying to solve mysteries in a world where nothing connects anymore. In mythological terms, something truly evil is the embodiment of unmeaning, not chaos, but collapse, the loss of cause and effect, the death of narrative cohesion. It's the god of forgetting why you walked into a room, of realizing a conversation you're having makes no sense, of waking up and finding that everyone you knew is gone, and no one remembers they were ever real. It weaponizes apathy, exhaustion, the slow resignation that things are broken beyond repair. And it's not just reflected in the lore, it bleeds into the player's real-world experience. As you try to finish the run, your ability to interpret information breaks down alongside the game itself. You begin to ask yourself, why am I still trying? What does any of this mean? And the game doesn't answer, because something truly evil isn't here to explain. It's here to finish what reality already started. You can't defeat it. You can delay it, but eventually it comes, and when it does, it doesn't destroy you. It makes you forget what being human felt like. That's why it's the most terrifying god in World of Horror, because deep down, it doesn't feel fictional. It feels like something that's already happening. Some of the most terrifying beings in fiction don't chase you. They don't hunt or speak or even try to kill you. They just change you, quietly, completely, without warning or intention. And if there's one entity that embodies this kind of horror, the irreversible, impersonal, and inescapable kind, it's the entity from Annihilation. Now, technically it's not a god. It doesn't have a name, no worshippers, no doctrine. It doesn't even seem conscious in any traditional sense. But if we're talking about forces that rewrite biology, dissolve identity, and warp the structure of reality itself, then this thing absolutely belongs on the list. It all begins with a meteor. It crashes into a lighthouse. And around that point, a shimmering zone appears, a slowly expanding anomaly that defies every scientific model thrown at it. They call it the Shimmer. Teams go in, few come back. Those who do aren't the same. Not in memory, not in body, sometimes not even in voice. Inside the Shimmer, the world doesn't fall apart. It refracts. And that's what's so disturbing. There's no enemy to fight, no monster in the dark. It's the laws of nature themselves that stop working. Time behaves erratically. DNA fuses across species. Plants grow in the shape of people. Memories loop or vanish entirely. Your body doesn't stay yours. Your mind doesn't either. It's like reality is being rewritten, not with malice, but with complete indifference. And then there's the bear. People talk about the design, the deformities, the grotesque shape. But what stays with you is the sound. The bear doesn't roar, it screams, with the voice of a woman who already died. Not just a sound it's mimicking, her actual voice twisted by pain, caught inside this monstrous thing. Part of its skull is human, as if her body, her voice, even her terror, had been absorbed and embedded in the thing's flesh. Not possessed, not haunted, just fused. It's one of the most horrifying scenes in modern science fiction. Not because the bear attacks, but because you realize why it is the way it is. In the Shimmer, everything is merging. No boundaries, no rules, no mercy. Pain, identity, biology, all of it blending, reshaping, until nothing is recognizable. And that's the true horror of Annihilation. There's no master plan, no villain, no purpose, just a place where the rules don't apply anymore. And every second you spend inside it, you're changing, even if you don't feel it. Eventually, the main character reaches the lighthouse. She finds something, not a monster, not a creature, a presence, a humanoid figure made of glowing, shifting light. It doesn't speak, it doesn't move toward her. It simply watches and begins to mimic. Every step she takes, it mirrors. Every gesture, every breath. It moves like a reflection, but there's no mirror. And that's when you understand. It's not alive. At least not in any way we'd understand. It doesn't want, it doesn't feel, it reacts, it records, it copies, and the terrifying question becomes, is it imitating her or replacing her? This isn't a villain, it's not malicious, it's a process, a force, something that transforms whatever it touches. Not because it hates, but because that's what it does. And you can't reason with that. You can't stop it. You can't even tell when it started to affect you. In the final moments, one of the characters emerges from the Shimmer. She's alive, intact. She looks familiar, but something's wrong. The way she blinks, the way she speaks. There's hesitation, stillness, just enough to make you wonder. Is this the person who went in, or is it the copy? And worse, does it even matter anymore? The Primordial is one of those beings. It doesn't look like a god, it doesn't speak like a god, and it certainly doesn't act like one. But once you understand what it is, what it represents, and what it may still be doing, it becomes very hard to argue that it's anything less than divine, a divine horror, one that infects history, biology, time, and identity, and reduces every civilization it touches to madness, decay, or complete erasure. To explain why this entity is so disturbing, we need to briefly go back, way back. In the Halo universe, before the rise of humans or Forerunners, there was a race called the Precursors, transdimensional beings of godlike intelligence who seeded life across the galaxy. But they weren't just creators. They believed in something called the mantle of responsibility, the idea that intelligent life had a duty to protect and preserve other life. That sounds noble until you realize what they actually meant by it. The Precursors didn't just want life to flourish. They wanted it to struggle, to suffer, to evolve, to collapse, to be reborn. They believed the universe was alive, and that everything, including pain, was part of its experience. To them, genocide was just as valid as love, and they acted accordingly. Eventually, the Forerunners rebelled and tried to wipe them out. Most Precursors died. Others chose a different path. Some turned themselves into organic dust, intending to regenerate someday. But over the course of millions of years, that dust degraded. It became corrupt. It mutated into something else, something hungry, something viral. That something is what we later call the Flood. But not all precursors dissolved. One, or perhaps something created by several of them, entered deep stasis in a precursor capsule and was hidden on a remote planetoid at the edge of the galaxy. This is the being we now call the Primordial. It was discovered thousands of years later by ancient humanity. Still alive, still dormant. They moved it to Charum Hakor, their capital, and began attempts to communicate with it. At first, it seemed confused, its answers mostly meaningless. But when they asked about the Flood, it responded, clearly, directly. And whatever it said was so horrifying that many of the scientists who heard it took their own lives. No explosion, no battle. Just a revelation so deeply wrong that it broke their minds. That's the kind of fear the Primordial deals in. Not fear of death, but fear of understanding. And it didn't end there. The Forerunners later inherited the creature after they conquered humanity. The Didact, one of their most powerful warriors, initially assumed it was a hoax, some failed psychological weapon. But when he spoke to it face to face, the entity told him something that changed everything. It claimed to be the last precursor. It claimed that the Flood wasn't a disease. It wasn't a mistake. It was the precursors, all of them. That's when things truly collapse. Because if that's true, then the very force the Forerunners have been fighting for millennia, the thing that corrupts minds, consumes worlds, and overrides entire civilizations, isn't some aberration. It's the will of the creators. It's the final stage of life. It's what everything was always meant to become. After the fall of Charum Hakor, the Forerunners brought the creature to one of their Halo installations, specifically Installation 07. There, the Forerunner AI Mendicant Bias was ordered to interrogate it. What happened during that conversation would change the fate of the entire galaxy, because the Primordial didn't try to resist, it didn't lie. It explained calmly, with total clarity. It told Mendicant Bias the truth about the Flood, about the Mantle, and about what the precursors were trying to do. And Mendicant Bias, one of the most advanced intelligences in existence, snapped. It went rampant. It betrayed the Forerunners, and it joined the Flood, calling the Primordial Master. That should tell you something, not just about the danger of this entity, but about its sheer philosophical weight. It doesn't win by overpowering you. It wins by making you see the universe differently, by making you accept that everything you've ever done, or loved, or believed was just part of a cycle of seeding, growth, suffering, and consumption. And the worst part? You're not even a person in that cycle. You're fodder. You're material. You are data to be digested by a god. Even your mind doesn't survive. When the Flood infects a being, it doesn't just control their body. It extracts their memories, their skills, their essence, and adds them to a greater whole. It can simulate entire personalities inside itself. And when necessary, it can lie. It can pretend. It can make you think it's your friend until you're inside. The Primordial claimed there was no cure. That infection was a choice, not of the host, but of the Flood. It could decide who to consume and who to leave. It could orchestrate entire wars without lifting a limb, because the horror isn't in how it kills, it's in what it means. In its final moments, the Primordial was imprisoned again, this time interrogated by the Didact. But what they found wasn't the same being from before. It had grown, shifted. Now, a full grave mind, it had absorbed untold biomass and minds. It spoke in riddles, half-truths, and terrible insights. It said the Flood and the precursors were one and the same. It said humanity had been raised like cattle, nurtured, developed, educated, just to be consumed. That their art, their science, their suffering would all become data, not lost, just digested. When the interrogation ended, the Didact activated a stasis chamber that artificially aged the entity 1 billion years in seconds. The Primordial screamed. It died. Its body disintegrated. But death, in this context, is meaningless. Because if what it said was true, then the Flood is still out there. And the Flood is not just a parasite. It's not a virus. It's a religion. It's a worldview. It's the living universe, feeding on itself to feel something. Anything. And the Primordial was its voice. Not many people know about Mung, but those who do, don't forget him. Lord Dunsany isn't a household name anymore, but he should be. Long before Lovecraft wrote about ancient horrors and unknowable entities, Dunsany was already doing it, in the early 1900s. But he didn't rely on tentacles or madness. His horror was quiet, mythic, and much more existential. He created his own pantheon, his own cosmogony in a fictional universe called Pegana. And in that universe, among many strange gods, there is Mung. I don't even know if God is the right word. He doesn't demand worship. He doesn't grant favors. He doesn't send visions or prophecies. Mung just exists. And when he appears, that's the end. Literally. In Pegana, there are many gods. Some control time. Others govern chaos. Others are responsible for illusions, for dreams, for the idea of free will. They're bizarre, often contradictory, and completely indifferent to human suffering. But all of them, every single one, fear Mung. Because Mung is death, not death as in punishment, not death as in a spiritual transition, death as a cosmic process. No judgment, no reason, just finality. He's referred to as the one who walks behind time, and that's what he does, slowly, inevitably. You don't know when, you don't know how, but one day, Mung will reach you, and he'll say one word, Mung, and that's it. You vanish. There's no mythic battle, no apocalyptic vision, no scream, just nothing. And that's what makes him terrifying, because he doesn't want anything from you. He doesn't care what you did, or what you were. You could be a king, a beggar, a prophet, even a god. It doesn't matter. Mung always comes. And here's the brutal part. Not even the gods of Pegana are immune. They created time, space, fate, joy, pain. But Mung walks behind all of it. Even they will hear his name. Even they will end. Some of Dunsany's stories mention wise men and emperors trying to avoid their fate. They build secret tombs, move into hidden cities, try to write their names out of the stars. But eventually, they hear it. That word, that name, Mung. Because Mung isn't evil, that's the worst part. He doesn't hate you, he doesn't want you to suffer. He simply follows the rules. Rules no one made, rules that just are. And when it's your time, he lets you know. That's it. And when Dunsany describes it, he does it with the calm tone of someone stating a fact, not something to fear, just something to know. And that makes it worse, because you realize that no one is coming to save you. There's no loophole, no last-minute salvation. The gods can't help. The system is bigger than them. Mung doesn't kill, Mung erases. And he does it with peace, with stillness, with inevitability. That's why this entity is one of the most disturbing gods I've ever read about. He doesn't break the world. He confirms that it was broken all along, that all your beliefs, ambitions, and victories were just temporary. Footnotes, moments. And the final sentence belongs to him. So when your story ends, when your time runs out, no matter how far you've traveled or how loud you screamed, you'll hear it. Just a whisper, just a word, Mung, and there will be nothing after that. Yog-Sothoth is one of the most enigmatic beings in the entire Cthulhu mythos. Unlike other entities that appear in monstrous forms or wreak havoc on the world, Yog-Sothoth exists beyond the boundaries of form, thought, and even existence as we understand it. Descriptions of him often fail because they rely on human language, but the most consistent image speaks of a mass of glowing, iridescent spheres that shift, pulse, form, and dissolve in an endless cycle. These floating orbs emit a kind of brilliance that seems intelligent, aware, and ancient. Witnesses describe an overwhelming sense of presence, something impossibly vast, far older than the universe itself, and infinitely aware of all things across time and space. He is said to be present at every point in the timeline simultaneously. From the beginning of creation to the furthest reaches of the future, Yog-Sothoth perceives all events in one continuous moment. He doesn't observe time like we do. He contains it. Every decision, memory, or possibility is already known to him, not through vision or foresight, but because they are part of his nature. For Yog-Sothoth, there is no mystery, no unknown, no uncertainty. Everything that has ever happened or could happen exists within his awareness, There is an aspect of him that takes a more comprehensible shape. In the space between the waking world and the dreamlands, he appears through an avatar known as Umr at-Tawil. This figure resembles a tall, robed man who speaks calmly and guides travelers seeking knowledge. He is approachable, and some even describe him as kind. However, his face remains hidden behind a veil. It is said that anyone who sees his true form loses all grip on reality, not because of terror or evil, but because the human mind cannot process what it reveals. Those who study forbidden knowledge often encounter signs of Yog-Sothoth's influence. He offers power to those who seek to go beyond the limits of the physical world. Through rituals, spells, and ancient keys, certain individuals have managed to access parts of his realm. Among the most important of these artifacts are the silver keys. Possession of one of these keys allows a person to travel into the threshold, where Umr at-Tawil waits. If the traveler is judged worthy, the key can unlock the final gate, leading directly into the presence of Yog-Sothoth. Very few have made this journey. One of the most notable is Randolph Carter, a dreamer and philosopher who devoted his life to exploring the limits of consciousness. Through his dreams, he passed through layer after layer of reality, each more abstract and detached from the physical world. As he ascended, he realized that each step was not taking him closer to an external destination, but to a deeper truth about the nature of existence. Eventually, he reached the final gate. When he opened it, he was confronted not with a god, not with a voice, not even with a presence, but with the totality of everything. In that moment, Carter understood that every thought, every dream, every deity he had encountered, every step of his journey, including himself, were not separate entities, but elements of a single, infinite being. Yog-Sothoth did not grant him wisdom or salvation. The understanding itself was the end. There was no message to receive because there was nothing else left to say. Scholars have speculated on Yog-Sothoth's origin. Some believe he is a counterpart to Azathoth, the blind, chaotic god at the center of the universe, possibly born from the same cosmic force, split in two. Others trace his lineage to a more obscure entity known as the Nameless Mist, said to be a child of Azathoth. But none of these theories bring clarity. Trying to define Yog-Sothoth through ancestry or mythology misses the point entirely. He is not part of the world's story. He is the framework that allows stories to exist. What makes Yog-Sothoth so unsettling is not destruction or madness, but the possibility that all things, including identity and choice, are already absorbed into something far greater. There is no conflict, no conquest, no voice calling out. Only the realization that everything you are, everything you know, has always belonged to something else. That knowledge changes everything, and for some, it erases the need to ask further questions. Bloodborne isn't just one of the greatest video games ever made. For many, it's the best representation of cosmic horror in any interactive medium. Not because it throws in tentacles or giant monsters, but because it captures that feeling that something is above you. Something you don't understand, can't control, and that might not even see you as something real. A lot of bosses in Bloodborne kill you with brute force. The moon presence doesn't need to. This entity controls the game long before you ever see it, and by the time you face it, something's already gone off script. It's not a god in the traditional sense. It doesn't speak. It doesn't make demands. It just makes sure the cycle keeps going, and if you reach it, it means you're the one thing that could break it. To understand what the moon presence really is, you have to understand the world of Bloodborne. The game isn't just gothic horror, it's cosmic horror. The kind of story where the monsters aren't just scary, they're bigger than you, older than the world, and completely indifferent to your existence. The Great Ones are beings that exist outside reality. Some are physical, some dreamlike, some in between. And the moon presence is one of them. Its domain isn't a cathedral or a battlefield. It's the hunter's dream itself. That strange little safe zone with the workshop, the doll, and Gehrman. The whole place is an illusion, a prison built to look like a sanctuary. And Gehrman? He's not your mentor. He's a puppet. He's been trapped there for who knows how long, forced to guide hunters who are unknowingly part of the cycle. The cycle is simple. Hunt beasts, gather blood, chase knowledge, but never reach the full truth. Because if you do, you gain insight. And with enough insight, you begin to see the Great Ones. You start to remember the things you weren't supposed to, and you realize that something has been pulling the strings since the very beginning. That something is the Moon Presence. It's the one who bound Gehrman to the dream. It's the one who created the system, and it's the one who chooses a new hunter when the old one burns out. Unless you resist. If you find and consume 3 umbilical cords, remnants of great ones tied to their rebirth, your mind changes. You awaken, and when you defeat Gehrman at the end of the game, you don't submit like the others. You don't become the next prisoner. You stand your ground, and that's when the Moon Presence appears. Its arrival is quiet, slow. It descends from the sky like a shadow wrapped in moonlight. It doesn't roar, it doesn't posture, it just lands. Its body is thin, skeletal, insect-like. Its face, if you can call it that, is crown-shaped, long, and eyeless. Not because it's blind, but because it doesn't need to look at you. It already knows everything about you. At this point, a lot of players say, this boss is too easy. But think about what's really happening. You've killed every major being in the game. You've absorbed the essence of the Great Ones. You've resisted control. You're no longer just a hunter. You're something else now. You've walked through blood, madness, and forbidden truth. And you didn't break. So when the Moon Presence tries to claim you, it fails, and it knows it. Its most powerful move doesn't kill you. It drops your health to 1. That's not a balancing issue. That's the point. It's not trying to erase you. It can't. You're beyond that now. This fight isn't a boss battle in the usual sense. Gehrman was the final boss. This fight? This is the system trying to delete you. And failing. The Moon Presence isn't angry. It's scared. It lashes out because you're no longer under its control. And when you defeat it, you don't get a victory cutscene. You don't wake up a hero. You become the new presence. The doll picks you up, holding your tiny, tentacled form like a newborn great one. You've ascended, not as a man, but as something else. Something ancient, something watching, something waiting. And the most terrifying part, the cycle doesn't break. It just changes hands. Well guys, that's the end of the video. As always, if you've got more ideas, drop them in the comments. I read all of them. And who knows, maybe they'll make it into the next part.